Thank you to Rabbi Stohl for taking time out of his day to enlighten us about what to do when you don't know what to do. The laws of Safek, as many of you know, many of his Talmidim are here. Rabbi Stohl is a Rabbi, part of the Masmidim program at KYHS, local high school, as well as a Musmach of YU, and lots of other important accolades that he won't want me to say. So thank you to Rabbi Stohl for joining us. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for learning with us.
All right, good morning. So the question at hand is, what do you do when you don't know what to do? I figured that was like a catchy title, why not? And so the high school boys were talking about it. They would play Russian eggs or something. You spin a bottle, you choose. That would be their answer. But we have other possibilities. What do you do if you have a suffix? If you're not sure what to do. So first, before we figure out what to do when you don't know what to do, so you first have to figure out what exactly is a suffix, meaning when do you actually have to be worried? Again, because there's a little bit of a tension. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be normal and happy people. So you're not supposed to be like, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to be like OCD and like always like worry about every little thing. Look over, like, oh, there's a guy right there. You don't want that. We want us to be like happy, healthy individuals. So you have to actually know there's actually a question. There's actually a suffix. If there's there are situations where you're not 100% sure. You might not be 1,000% sure about everything, but there only hits to a point of suffix on when you actually have a real doubt. So what's considered a real doubt? So the halachic term for that would be called a leidas hasafik. A leidas hasafik means when a question is born. When is it actually a question, and when is it you're just like a nervous individual, but there's no question here. So again, this is a very, very broad topic. I'm going to kind of give a brief sketch in a way, but there's obviously a lot more to talk about. These are the basics. So number one, if you know the answer to a question, then it's not a suffix. You don't have to keep second guessing and third guessing, fourth. If you know the answer to a question, let's say as an example, you yourself asked the Rav about this question yesterday, and he told you the answer, and it's exactly the same question. You don't have to be worried. Oh no, maybe I misunderstood. Like you got it. You asked the question, you got it. So if you know the answer, there is no question. Even if there are those who disagree, but if you know the answer to your question based on who you are, who you ask, whatever it is, then there's no suffix. Also, if there's a like I was saying, if there's a machlokus about something, but you have a clear psah, again we'll discuss that later. But if there might be a machlokus in the world, and others might do differently, but your Rav or your posek paskins one way, then there's no suffix for you. That's not a question. That is what you are allowed and even supposed to do. And number three is if there's no real doubt, like you're like, oh no, what if someone in my fridge, we'll discuss this more, but what if like someone in the middle of the night came in and switched the meats around, and all the meats in my fridge really are not kosher, and I thought they were kosher? That's a ridiculous suffix. There's no reason for real doubt. There has to be an actual reason for doubt, right? So there's food on this table over here, and I think Rabbi Weinstock bought it, and it was so now someone could hypothetically be like worried, oh no, but what if a million things happen? You don't have to worry that a million things happen. You can be normal. And he put the food there, and there's no reason to believe that anything happened. So that is not a suffix. So again, a leidas suffix is only when there's some actual reason to doubt. So I'll give a few possible reasons why there actually might be a doubt. If you have a certain topic and you really don't know anything about it. So let's say you're just new to this whole Judaism thing, and now Shabbos comes, and you know about the beauty of Shabbos because you saw someone, you were at a Kabbalah Shabbos one time and you saw someone make Kiddush. And so you know there's this idea called Shabbos, and you really don't know anything about it. And here comes your first Shabbos and you know nothing about Shabbos. So that's a real suffix because you really have no idea what to do. Like, there are laws of Shabbos and you don't know any of them, right? So that is obviously a very, very valid suffix because you really don't know anything. That's obviously an extreme, but there are different cases of that when you have a certain type of situation and you really don't know much about it at all. That is obviously a real valid suffix. Let's say you do think you knew something, you always thought you knew something, but you saw a knowledgeable person, again, I highlight a knowledgeable person, or a group of knowledgeable people doing otherwise. Again, that is a valid reason for a question, for you to question yourself, because I always thought this way, they're all doing it that way. that is a valid reason for a thinking individual to think, wait, maybe I'm doing it all wrong. If a knowledgeable person or a knowledgeable group of people are doing things differently, that's a good reason to second guess yourself. Or if, let's say, you heard a shir or you read something, again, in some halachic literature or something, and it says something different than what you've always been doing. Again, that is a valid reason to now be bothered. Am I getting it right? Now, the answer might be you're still getting it right, and there's a machlokes about this, and your Rav passes this way. But there's a valid reason to at least second guess yourself if there is, again, so you either, you don't know anything about the topic, you have no previous knowledge, or you see people doing otherwise, so it makes you start to second guess, or if you read or hear something that makes you actually have a real doubt. But just nervousness is not a real doubt. Nervousness is just nervousness. Okay. So what do you do? Let's say you actually do have a doubt. So then what do? Right? Most people, including myself, do not know everything. So when we have a question, you just don't know what to do and you're stuck in a certain situation, what should you do? So of course, the smartest thing to do is to try to ask beforehand, right? Meaning either you look it up somewhere, if you're not able to, look everything up yourself, so you ask someone who actually does know. So the obvious best thing to do is try to ask. Now, the thing is, let's say I was telling my Talmidim the other day, let's say there's a lot of things that I don't know. I don't know more than I do know, right? Meaning most things in the world I just don't know. Most halacha I don't know well. And now what do I do? So I'm sure that there's like hundreds, thousands, who knows, of halachos that I don't know. So I was actually once at a wedding. I always tell my Talmidim the best time to find big rabbis and ask big rabbis questions is at weddings. It's the best reason to go to weddings, besides the chassan and kala. But you try to find, because rabbis are usually they're like waiting to kind of whatever. So they usually have some time. So it was years ago, I was at a wedding and I saw Rabbi David Cohen. Rabbi David Cohen is a tremendous posek in Brooklyn. And I saw him at a chasana. So again, I attack rabbis at weddings. That's how it is. The rabbis in the room, watch out. So I went to Rabbi David Cohen and asked him how to learn halacha. At the time, I was around 20. I said, I don't know Shabbos. I don't know Hilchos Shabbos well. Again, I kept Shabbos my whole life, but I don't know like the ins and outs of Hilchos Shabbos well. So what do I do about Hilchos Shabbos? So he told me, learn the general rules. Learn the klalim, he said. Learn the klalim, the general rules of the 39 malachos. He told me, learn the Beis Yosef, which is like gives you a general outlook on the halachos. He said, learn all the klalim. I said to him, if I learn all the general ideas, I won't know any of the details. And halacha has a lot of details. He said, it's true, but the way he told to me, you probably don't know all of Choshen Mishpat either. You probably don't know all the rules of stealing either. You're probably stealing every day also. But what are you supposed to do? You try your best. So I hope I don't steal every day. But the point is that there are a lot of things I don't know. So he was saying that you try to learn the general rules as the best you can. You have now, what does that help? You have now the general ideas, and now you know what to ask. You now know when there's a problem, and you know when there's not a problem, even better, right? So if Shabbos comes and you know the general ideas, again, obviously, if you know every single detail as well, that would be even better. But if you know the general ideas, so you at least know when I have no reason whatsoever to think there's a problem right now, or I remember there's a general idea about this. This is something I need to find out more about, and then you could look into, ask, etc. about the details. So again, obviously, if anyone in here has a photographic memory, just go through everything really quickly and memorize everything. That would be fantastic for you. But for the rest of us, if we don't have photographic memories, you can't remember every single detail. If you learn as much as you can the general ideas, you then know, you have the knowledge to know when something is a problem, when something's not a problem, and then you have what to ask. Probably the most fundamental way to know what to do is watch knowledgeable people, see what they do. Meaning the Gemara calls it Shimash Talmidei Chachamim. Shimash Talmidei Chachamim means just being around knowledgeable individuals. A lot of the things that I do are because the Rav of my shul was a big Talmid Chacham when I was growing up. I would see what he did, and if he did it when I was growing up, so I know that's a proper way to act. Again, I wasn't around him all the time. So my parents, thank God, they're from home. My father's a knowledgeable person. He's always asked Shabbos to the Rav. So I trust, and I know I lived in my own home when I was a kid. I lived in my own home. My father was again, my parents are from people. My grandfather was a rabbi, so my mother grew up in a very from home. So I see what they did. And every now and then when questions came up, I asked whatever it was. But there was a general outlook of, okay, I know that's okay because I saw that's what was done by knowledgeable individuals. So the best way by far to know the answer to a question is knowing what knowledgeable people do. That being said, obviously there are things that even knowledgeable people sometimes could get wrong sometimes, so they need to ask. And there are obviously a lot of people who are not so knowledgeable, very well-intentioned people, they're not so knowledgeable, and they do a lot of things that are not correct. So that obviously would also not be necessarily something you can learn from because they really don't know what they're doing in the first place. They're wonderful people, they just don't know the halacha. That would also not be something you could follow. But if you see knowledgeable people acting a certain way, that is another way to be able to answer your own stuff. If you have a question, what should I do? You don't know the exact halacha on this question, but I know that I've seen X, Y, and Z people who I know are very knowledgeable, and I've seen that do this. That's a very good way to know what to do. But let's say all that fails. You haven't ever seen a Talmid Chacham or a knowledgeable individual do this, and you don't know the detail on this one. You might know a cloud, but you don't have a prat. You don't know the detail. So what do you do? Just what do you do? So if you have a valid safek, again, if it's just nervousness, you're just a nervous person, get over it. Meaning, move on. There's no reason just to be nervous. You're allowed to do what is correct, what you've always understood is correct. But if you're not just nervous, there is a valid reason why you really have a safek. Again, you saw somewhere not like this. You remember there was a real question, and now you're like stuck. You're not sure what to do. And so obviously, if you have someone to ask right then and there, great. Let's say you have no one to ask right then and there, and you have to make a decision on the moment. So then it really depends. If you have a valid safek, and you could refrain from whatever this is. Give an example. Let's say there is a certain food, and you remember there's a real question about this. Again, not just nervousness. You have a real valid question about about the kashrus of this food, or let's say again, very practical. You have a hechsher, and you're out of town. You have a certain hechsher. You simply don't know if this hechsher is a good hechsher or not. And it's a food. You're not starving. I think the smart thing to do and the right thing to do would be just to refrain. Don't have it. Meaning, if you don't know and you have a valid safek, you're not just conjuring up some random questions, but you really have a valid safek. You don't know. You have absolutely no idea. You don't live here. So until you know the answer to a question, refrain. So that would be number one. Would be if you really don't know and you have a valid safek, don't do it. If let's say there are certain situations where you can't just not do it, you have to make a decision one way or the other. You have to do something for whatever reason. Let's say it's there are many situations refraining is not a possibility. You have to go either that way or that way. One of the two has to happen. So look, if there's no one around to ask, you simply don't know. You have to make your best educated guess. What are you supposed to do? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects us to live, and we try our best. So if there's all other things fail, and you don't have any possibility of what to do, you try to make the best educated guess as possible. So when you can't refrain, and you might get it wrong. And then usually what I'll do, I'm often ask questions myself. If it's something I don't know and I have time to answer, so I'll say, I'll get back to you in a day, and I'll look into it. I'll get back to them in a day. Sometimes I have to make a decision on the spot. It's not a question I can hold off. I need to make a decision right then and there. So sometimes I know for sure, and sometimes I make an educated guess. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll make an educated guess based on what I do know. And usually on all those, not usually, almost always, on those questions, after I make the educated guess, I'll then, of course, after the fact, ask someone to find out, did I make the right educated guess? This happened many times, but what are you supposed to do? Again, you have to live, so you have to try your best. Those are the general guidelines. Again, so just knowing what a safek is, that's number one. Just knowing when is a safek, when is not a safek, when do I have to be worried? And then when I do have to be worried, trying to get out of the problem in the first place, watching educated people, knowing the general rules. But in the end of the day, if you absolutely have no idea, you try to refrain. If you can't refrain, then just make your best educated guess. Now, getting into some ideas that are thrown around and trying to understand them a little bit better. So I've heard when discussing this topic, well, people know the idea called Safek Deraisa L'Chumra and Safek Derabanan L'Kula. That if something is a Deraisa, is a Torah law, so then you go L'Chumra, then you have to be Machmir, you have to be strict. If something is a Derabanan, then you can be Mekel, and you can be lenient. So that's true, but not true. That's only true when there is an actual Safek. Meaning, the Gemara says that there's such a thing called Das Shotim. Das Shotim ain't a Das. Meaning, literally that means that the mind, the knowledge of a fool is not knowledge. Meaning, if I personally don't know the bracha for something, let's say there's a food in front of me, and I don't know the bracha, but it's because I just never learned Hilchos Brachos. I know nothing. I know very little about brachos in the first place, and I don't know the bracha on this. That's not a safek. I can't be brachos are derabanan, so safek derabanan l'kula. That doesn't work because I don't know brachos. So that's not even a safek. That's not, you don't apply safek derabanan l'kula because I don't know the answer. That's shotim the knowledge of a shota, it doesn't literally have to be a shota. No one in this room is a shota. A shota is a fool, but it means it's a phrase that just because we don't know something doesn't mean that it's actually a suffix. That just means that I don't know the answer because I haven't looked it up. I don't know the directions from here to almost anywhere in the world. I would actually have to, but that doesn't mean it's a suffix. This means I'd have to look at a map or whatever it is, or look on, I don't know, some device. You have to figure it out, but that's not a suffix. So number one, you can't really apply Safek D'Oraisa, the form of Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, just because you don't know something. Usually what you have to do is, again, ask. And what we talked about before, again, if it's absolutely impossible to ask, there's no one around, etc., you try to refrain. Like we said, you try to refrain. If it's impossible to refrain, you make your best educated guess. But the Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Chumra, the Safek D'Oraisa, the L'Chumra, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula really has no relevance to that, because usually when we don't know something, most of the people in this room, when we don't know something, it's usually because we just don't know, not because it's actually an objective problem. Now, just to explain, so when is it an actual objective problem that we do apply Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, that we're strict on a D'Oraisa and we're makel and we're lenient on a D'Rabbanan? There's a few cases. One, if it's a Safek in Mitzias, we don't know what happened. Let's say something spills and you're not sure exactly, did it spill, did it not spill, what did it touch, what did it not touch? That's an actual suffix because there's no one around. It's spilled. There's no way to know the answer to that question. There weren't cameras. I don't know. We don't know. So that's an actual suffix. That's an actual doubt. We don't know. That would be a case where a Rav would apply Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Also, there's a Locus a poskim. Let's say you go to a Rav and again, a knowledgeable individual, a knowledgeable person, and he asks a certain question. He says he happens to know this, and there is a machlokas in poskim. Different rabbis hold different things on this matter. So that would be a valid. That's again. Let's say there are two valid poskim who are both of equal stature. So that would be a suffix. They're equal stature, equal poskim, equal opinions, and so it often, we'll explain in a second, but often that would be if it's a daraisa, if it's a Torah law, the Rav would have to be machmer, have to be strict. If it's a Rabbanan, the Rav could be lenient. That would be again a place, but that's not something that most of us can usually apply because you have to have a lot of information in order to use this cloud. I mean, to use the general rule of Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, to be makel or machmir, to be lenient or strict, you actually have to know what the poskim say. You know the opinions on this matter. Usually, it's not something that most of us can apply on a daily basis. Just to round that off, there are a few. The reason this is even more complicated, even for a Rav, it's not like, oh well, I don't know, or I know there's a machlokas about this, so I can just go L'Chumra on a D'Oraisa and go L'Kula on a D'Rabbanan. It's not quite like that. Because also, I always say that halacha is more of an art than a science. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's not just, there's no like machine that spits out answers on exact formulas. You have to know, you have to have a chush for it. You have to have a certain feeling for what is the general accepted psak on something. What is some of the things that need to take into account of a rove. Let's say there are many poskim hold one way, even if it's a daraisa, but many or most poskim say lakula. That would be a reason you could possibly go lakula. Let's say there's a general psak. Let's say in America, so America, Moshe Feinstein's shuvos have a much heavier weight than they do in Eretz Yisrael. So it depends on who the general psak is in your area. Let's say there's a rav of the town. That would obviously be a huge difference. There's a let's say one of the poskim involved, two people, but one of them is such greater stature than the other individual. You would have to know that. I mean, that's not something that if you're not knowledgeable, you don't who might have grade who's higher. Okay, but Klal Yisrael has graded this to a degree, and you have to really understand how this works. The note of Yehuda versus someone else is the note of Yehuda had tremendous weight. It's just a different. You're talking with like one of the major league players as opposed to someone who's a wonderful, amazing person, but not the note of Yehuda. Whatever, if all of us don't know the note of Yehuda is, you can Google it. And there's also something called das nota or svara, that there's a certain idea that if there's equal stature possibly, but the general direction heads in one person's direction, it's another reason why we would go like one. The point is that applying Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra and Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula is not simple. You really have to know what you're doing. So in terms of like when I'm trying to say what each of us should do, if you don't know what to do, this section doesn't really help all that much because it's something that poskim need to use. A posik needs to understand Safek D'Rabbanan, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. But on an individual basis, it's very hard to apply that because there's just so much that goes into that part of halach. So in terms of practical, still the first section of this shmooze is a little bit more practical of know when it's a suffix, know when it's not a suffix. And when it is a suffix, you try to remember what you've seen Talmidei Chacham in the past do, what knowledge people do, and you try to know the klal, you try to know and then at the end of the day, you try to make your best guess if that's what it comes to. If you can't refrain, you try to make your best guess. A few more things. So another concept that comes up is a huge concept we're just going to touch on is a chazaka. Chazaka means that it's something that you could assume certain assumptions, meaning that I parked my car in the parking lot. Right now, there's a chazaka that car is there because I assume that if I left the car there, South Florida, there might be not that. Thank God, Hollywood has had a few break-ins, but thank God I've never had my car stolen until now. I assume my car is still there. So that is a valid assumption. So now, if there's a halachic question that would come up, whether or not my car is there, and let's say there's no way to check. If I can easily check, I have to go check. But if there's absolutely no way to check for whatever reason, I can assume my car is still there and then act accordingly. And again, that's just a random example with a car, but like almost anything else. The chazakas all the time. Again, you do not have to be OCD. You're not supposed to be OCD. Meaning you're supposed to be a person who is a normal, happy person. The Torah does not want us to drive ourselves crazy. So there's an idea called the chazaka. We can make a valid assumptions. Again, they have to be valid assumptions. So if there is a real suffix involved, once something happens, and again, it becomes a leidas suffix, a real suffix now happened, then already it's more of a question. Even many of those cases, you can still rely on a chazaka very often, that if that's how it's been, something may have happened, something may not have happened, we can still often rely on the fact we're going to assume it didn't happen because we don't have enough of a reason to be that worried. But again, that's already complicated. That's the kind of thing that a Rabbi would have to deal with. But on just for us, how are we gaining from this concept? This concept is helpful to know that you are allowed to make valid assumptions. Again, the easy assumption is if something was there, it's still there. If something was, if your cholent was kosher, unless you know that something spilled in the cholent, or a very good reason to believe something happened, you can assume it's still fine. And again, and many other examples like that. A couple more things, then we're done. How about avoiding a suffix in the first place? So really the smartest thing of all I guess besides the first section of trying to know the general ideas, just to know when there is a suffix, just to know and to watch Talmidei Chachamim, just to know what they do, so you know when you should be worried, when you should not be worried. Besides that, there's the Chazal say the Ezu Chacham. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says Ezu Chacham Alomin Mikol Adam. It's also very good that you should always learn from other people. But there's another name in the Gemara in Talmud. It says that Ezu Chacham Aroas Anolad. Who's a Chacham? Someone who sees into the future. Now, how can you see in the future? It says who's a Chacham, not a Navi. How in the world are you going to see the future? But it says Aroas Anolad. You have to have a little bit of Chacham Eina Barosha. You have to have a little bit of Seichel. It's unfortunate that there's no pill for Seichel. It's really unfortunate because it would do the world a lot of good. But there's no pill for Seichel. You kind of have to understand what it means to think straight, to have a balanced, good mind. It's the kind of thing that I'm trying very hard to teach my Talmidim. Slowly, we're getting there. But you have to have seichel. So the chacham in the barosho, someone that you have to see into the future a little bit. You know, if you're going somewhere for Shabbos and there are going to be issues, so just avoid the suffix in the first place. Think this Shabbos, what are the issues going to be where I'm going, and then deal with all those issues before Shabbos comes. Either set up the situation that those issues don't even apply, or ask beforehand. But meaning a huge part of suffix is just don't be in the case of a suffix in the first place. That's our fault. Meaning it's one thing to be in a case of suffix, it just happened, it just landed on my lap. Okay, that's not my fault. But if I was negligent and I didn't think about the suffix in the first place, well, that's definitely my problem. Why didn't I do that? Again, if I did it, now I'm in the situation, I have to make my best educated guess. But don't be in the situation in the first place. And think about it in advance. You have to think in advance. I'll give you another way to apply that concept of avoiding a suffix. Let's say in brachos, we all know that, let's say you're not sure exactly what a bracha is on something. So if you're not sure exactly what the bracha is, so I've seen a lot of people, okay, so I'll say a shahakol. That's not exactly the right thing to do. That's like, I'll explain why that's just as an aside, but why is it not the thing to do? Okay, say shahakol. Thank you for everything, Hashem. That's fantastic. But let's say let's say my wife goes out of her way and she dafka made me a dinner by the time I came home, a long day, and I'm coming home on a mishmar night and 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night. and she knows I had a long day, and she's very nice, and she was taking care of 4 other kids, but she saw what she had to do, and she heated up a dinner for me. So I come home that there's a warm dinner. That's very nice of her. And I say like, oh, Malki, thank you for everything. It's wonderful. It's very nice. But like, I should say, thank you for taking the time to stop what you were doing to make me this dinner. That's a much more meaningful thank you than thank you for everything. You're great. Again, that's also nice. You should also tell your spouse, thank you for everything. You're great. But there is also specifically, you did something specific for me this time. That is a specific thank you. If you're always just say thanks for everything, thank you for everything, for everything, it gets a little bit cheap. So we're supposed to try to make the best bracha that we can, the best type of thank you that we possibly can. So let's say we don't know the question to what type of bracha to make. So again, if that is a valid suffix, you have a food and you don't know what exactly to do. So there are ways. I'm not learning Hilchos Brachos right now, but there are ways to get out of that. Let's say you have a certain thing you're not sure if it's this or this. You're not sure. I don't know. You have a fruit or a vegetable. Really not sure. Something you're not sure if it's fruit or vegetable. Or you have some type of salad and you're not sure, or some type of dish. You're not sure if it's mazonos. Is there enough mazonos here? Like, it's like a cake type of thing? You're not sure what to do with this thing. You know it's either shahakol or mazonos, or you know this thing it's either a hadam or a ha'etz. You're just not sure which one this is. So again, if it's possible, get yourself an apple, get yourself a tomato, make both, and then you can for sure eat this thing. Then you don't have a problem. I mean, you don't have to be crazy. If you know the answer to the question, go with what you know. But if you have a valid suffix, you really have no idea, don't just make a shahakol. Don't just say, oh, thank you for everything. Take the effort to show your spouse that you actually care, and say thank you for a specific thing. How am I going to do that? So you cover your bases. I'm for sure thanking you for this. I'm for sure thanking you for this. Now this is covered. I mean, there are ways when sfeikos if we have a little bit of care to get out of sfeikos in such a way. You can cover your bases another way. Again, people know you can like have a hamotzi and that covers everything. It's another possibility. But there's other ways even without having an hamotzi to do such a thing. Let's say you're not sure if this is a kazayas, not a kazayas. Again, so either go on a diet and don't eat so much, or go get a little heavier and eat a little much. But you don't have to be in that suffix land. Many times there's no reason to put yourself into a case of a doubt. You can often get out of the doubt just by avoiding it in the first place, either by seeing into the future or by doing special, again, just caring enough to just, get out of the doubt in the first. I was once listening to a halacha shir. It was very funny. Actually, the Rav was giving a shir on a certain topic in what to do if certain pot spills, whatever it is. And one of the women goes, I loved her question. Like, I don't understand the problem. Just use plastic. Meaning just use a plastic spoon and then throw it out. It was brilliant. She's right. Meaning, if you have this problem, you're not sure exactly what to do, so just use plastic and throw it out. So the Rav was saying, you're right, but I'm talking about but the Rav, again, who's a Tam Chacham, he was talking about the halach, he was talking about okay, what do you do? But the woman was also right. And she was saying, don't worry about the stuffing in the first place, just use plastic. Again, I'm not saying that you should always do that. You do not need to be OCD when you have it's only when you have a valid suffix. If you have a real suffix, then that's a good time to then use some of these problems. If you know the answer, you don't have to be crazy and be overly machmer for no reason. Last point, and this is extremely important before anyone has to go to the mechanic. This is the last very important point. In terms of money matters. So until now, we're talking about isser v'heter, basically, things which are us, which are mutter, mitzvos, brachos, etc. How about when it comes to money? So I'll tell you, this is like, I saved the best for last. This is a little bit to a side point, but it's so crucial that like, if there's one thing to take away from this, but this would be it. When it comes to money, Rav Shechter once told me that I was once driving him. I try to drive Shechter around whenever he's here. And when I was once, I ask him I save up any hard questions I have for when I'm with him. So I once asked him a complicated question in Hilchos Gzela. It's unconsidered stealing. You're not stealing. So after he told me the answer, then off the cuff, he told me, I don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Gzela into the Seres Adibros. This is tongue in cheek. I don't know why he put it right into the 10 Commandments. He should have put it like a little Sharet Sion somewhere, and he should have made a Chumrah, and then people would want to keep it. But he put it in the 10 Commandments. So that's why no one cares about it. Meaning that he was saying tongue in cheek. He was saying that of all things, we should be extremely, extremely machmir on sveikos. The one place in Kol Torah Kula that we should be extremely machmir, extremely strict, is about stealing from others. Now, it sounds like who steals from others? Well, I'll just give a few examples. I had a Talmud recently. Someone he wasn't in it was before my high school days, but it was when I was in the Kollel here, so I learned with him. He was in the high school, and then we kept in touch. We're very close over the years. So now he has a job, and he started his job recently, a few months ago. And he called me before he got his job, and he said, Rabbi, could you give me some advice? Now I'm going into the working world. Do you have any advice? Any chumras I should take on? I said, yes, you should take on extremely machmir on emes, extremely machmir on truth. That you're going to go into the working world, the number one thing is to be machmir on truth. And I thought I was giving him advice, which I think was very good advice. But it's funny, since then, it was only a few months ago, he's called me numerous times. Thank God, bless him. He called me numerous times with the most, it's terrible, the working world. I mean, he's just in business. He's in a normal business. He's a wonderful person. And he's asking the questions. And he's saying, well, my boss is telling me to do this. It doesn't seem like that's okay. What do I do about it? And he's called me 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times about questions that his boss is telling him to do something, which is really not okay to do. And I said, you really should find yourself another job, meaning that you're always trying to bend the truth. It's a big problem. You should be extremely machmir on truth. So there's a safek about other people's money, a safek in other people's money in general, don't take it. That just, again, it's a little bit of a point, but if people start playing sfekos, playing Russian roulette with other people's money, you're dealing with this, like the says the Kadosh Baruch Hu is Chosamus Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu's emes. The stamp of Hashem is truth. It says that it's a Torah's emes, meaning the number one thing in the Torah, it's true. To go against that, to lie, cheat, and steal, chas v'shalom, of all places to be machmir, over here when it comes to problems in stealing, you should be overly machmir. You should be extremely strict when it comes to stealing from other people's money, God forbid. I'll give a few examples that, I know it sounds like who steals from other people's money. I'll give examples that come, unfortunately, all the time in the business world, all the time. How about again, for the young people here, you don't exactly know what I'm talking about, the people who are already working do, and the younger people should listen for when this does come. Let's say you're a doctor. What kind of stealing do I do on a doctor? Well, billing insurance for things that you really didn't quite do, that is stealing. So billing an insurance company, and what exactly did you do? You have to stick with the books, whatever it says. Stealing, even if it's through an insurance company and you're not actually going with a gun and stealing some money from someone's wallet, that is still stealing. So if there's a safek of, am I allowed to bill for this? Am I not allowed to bill for this? I'm not saying the answer to that question, but the question should be asked. The question of sfekos when it comes to money matters must be asked. There's taxes, obviously. Describing a product, if you're a salesman, if you're in real estate, you're describing a certain situation, how much can you bend the truth on describing something? Usually you should not be bending the truth on these things. Again, if you have a question, you should be asked. I would hope that the Rabbanim in the shul are asked all the time about money matters. I'm a little doubtful that always happens. And I think people have to make sure to ask questions when it comes to whatever your business you're in. Billable hours, if you're a lawyer, just what are you allowed to bill? Again, all these things, doesn't mean taking money from a bank with a gun. The things that come up in life all the time, it's still theft, or it's a safek of theft, and we're not sure. Like we said, in every other area that we've spoken about, the rule was you have to use your seichel. You have to know when something is a safek, when something's not a safek. Try to avoid the problem in the first place. When it comes to money, of all places in Kol Torah Kula, we should be that much more strict about. It says Yeshaya Hanavi at the beginning of Yeshaya. It says the base of Mikdash was destroyed because we were thieves. I assume we didn't go around stealing from banks. But again, I don't know if we billed all the right hours, and I'm not sure if we charge the insurance company exactly what we're allowed to charge them. Again, they're just as a side for this point, there is a really good book called The Halachos of Other People's Money. So that's all about daily things that come up, the halachos of other people's money. It's a great book to get. There's a based in Miami. Rav David Shon is fantastic Talmud Chacham. Again, these things, I think that questions in Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Tefillah come up, and Hilchos Kashrus, they come up. I think not enough questions are asked when it comes to the sfekos, real questions in halacha, when it comes to other people's money. And I think it's just something that needs chizuk. So I'm giving a shir about what to do when you don't know what to do. Well, many of us, most of us, all of us don't know what to do when it comes to money matters, because they're complicated halachos, and we often are more ahead. We allow ourselves to do things that are not always okay. I think that maybe I should have started with that, but maybe that if I finish with this, then people will remember that the stamp of the Kadosh Baruch Hu is truth, and we have to make sure to be truthful at all times. So the upshot of everything is just as much as we can to learn the general rules, learn, ask, and as we learn more, as we ask more, we know more, we have less sfekos. and keep davening for Mashiach. It says when the time of Mashiach happens, so will become more chacham in general. We'll have less fakos, less questions. And one way to allow us to have Mashiach is by being straight individuals, truthful people, and Am Kadosh. Okay.